So you may have heard people talk about using astro-modified cameras, but what does it mean? Do you need one? And if so, how do you get one? Gonna cover all that now. So astro-modified cameras are regular DSLR or mirrorless cameras where part of the internal filter, the infrared filter, has been removed. The advantage of this is to increase your camera's capability of capturing certain types of light from certain deep sky objects. So specifically, astro-modified cameras better capture red light emitted by certain nebulae. You can see examples of this here in these images where a couple of great photographers that we know have used astro-modified cameras, and you can see those pinks and reds coming through in the night sky, which you don't otherwise capture with a non-modified camera. We looked at the Milky Way Photographer of the Year competition over the last 2 years. So 50 images to look at what cameras, lenses and other gear we used. You can download the full data below. There's a link, or there's another video on here you can watch. But 70% of the cameras used were astro-modified. So a lot of very good nightscape photographers do astro-modify their cameras, and they get these amazing results from it. Now, there are two types of astro-modification of cameras that's worth explaining. So there's firstly H-alpha conversion, which is also sometimes referred to as super UV IR cut, depending on whether you're in the US or Europe. This is the most common type for astrophotography. So this is where if you have a camera that has this modification, it will be able to be used for astrophotography without any additional filters and things. The second type is a full spectrum conversion, also called full range. This is a more versatile conversion because it gives the camera the capacity to do more than just astrophotography. So it can also do ultraviolet or near infrared photography or regular daytime photography. However, each type would then require a filter. So you can use it then for astrophotography, just like the H-alpha conversion, but you'll need an extra filter. So it adds an extra step to the workflow, which is, cost, time, complication, which perhaps you don't need, which is why most astrophotographers go for the H-alpha conversion, because it's just taking one camera and making it their astrophotography camera. As you can see from these images, astro-modified cameras can evidently get you great results, but there are a few downsides to it. So with an H-alpha conversion, it affects the white balance, which becomes apparent if you try and use that camera for regular daytime photography. So you can fix this with custom white balance settings or by using filters, but generally most people getting an astro-modified camera will be using that camera to be their nightscape photography camera and dedicating it to that purpose, and having another camera or maybe even just their smartphone for casual photography or daytime photography, depending on what they're doing. It touched on the downside of the full spectrum conversion is that it will effectively need to have a different filter for whatever you want to use it for. So it's a more complex workflow. There are 3 ways to get an astro-modified camera. So you can buy a modified camera, you can use a modification service, or you could even perform the modification yourself. So I'm going to go through these. So buying a pre-modified camera is an option. It's a good option. Previously, Canon and Nikon sold astro-modified cameras off the shelf. So Canon, only a few years back, had the Canon EOS RA. So that was a Canon EOS R with the filter modified, and then the A was for astrophotography, and then that was a off-the-shelf, very good camera. For whatever reason, it didn't last long on the market. I guess there wasn't the demand for it. Nikon also did a similar thing. They had their D810A with the filter modified. You might be able to find these on the used market, but it's not that common that you see them around anymore. You can also buy cameras that have been modified by professionals off the shelf. So these are normal DSLR and mirrorless cameras where a retailer is modifying them professionally and then selling them. So you can get hold of a Sony a7 III pre-modified. So Life Pixel in the USA is a company that does this. Astro Shop in Europe do this as well. A second option is to get a camera you already own modified professionally. So this is where You get the camera, you want to use it for astrophotography and take to the next level. You send it off to your provider, and then it comes back modified at some point later. LifePixel offer this service in the US. There are lots of similar services around the world. In each country, you can usually find one if you do a bit of searching. This is a good option if you have a camera that you already own. You know you want to dedicate it to nightscape astrophotography, so you send it off and you use it for that. The last option to save some money is to modify your own camera. So this is whereby you take the camera that otherwise you would send off to a professional, but you find a tutorial online, and they do exist on YouTube, and you take your camera apart and you modify the lens. This is a bit risky. I wouldn't really recommend it, but some people may be confident to try it if they know their way around. I would say of all the people that I've worked with and whose images you see who use astro-modified cameras, they've all had them done by professional services. None of them have done them themselves as far as I know. So it's a bit of a risky step, but could be done. Lastly, important point, do you need an astro-modified camera? So if you're a beginner, the answer is no, you don't. You can go really far with a good camera, good lens, good tripod. You can get great results, you can do really well, and there's so many elements to astrophotography that you need to master that if you're a beginner, I would start there. Where you might want to think about modifying a camera is if you're starting to push the limits, you're starting to master the capturing of images, processing, the whole workflow, and then you know you can get more from your camera. It's becoming almost a limitation, your camera. That's the point where perhaps you want to go off and get it modified. But a regular DSLR mirrorless camera can perform amazingly well. In our Star Trails course, which is taught by Zhao, he uses a Sony full frame camera that's not modified, and he gets amazing images like this. So that's covering landscape astrophotography. Cayetana Saiz, who teaches our deep sky photography course with regular cameras, her camera is not modified. She's using a Canon DSLR, not modified. She's getting photos like this. So if you're interested in any of those courses, you can see links below. If you want to understand more about the top gear for nightscape astrophotography, you can check out this video on the Milky Way Photographer of the Year competition and the gear used, or else click below to download any of our quick cheat sheets to get all this data.